Welcome, and welcome one more time to the most healthiest podcast there is on the web. I am Ian Costello, the IT guy that's usually in the back hiding, but I got the man himself though, Mr. Matthias Sweet.
How you doing there, Ian?
We gonna try and make this work. We feeling in for Mr. Joseph Ward. He's somewhere on the beach sipping margarita somewhere, but he left this in good hands. So we're here to save the day. Always remember that Mind Your Body and Soul is the healthiest podcast there is, where we try to fulfill your mind, your body, and your soul with healthy related topics for our listeners and our viewers all out there on the land viewing this right now. You can find us on Anchor, Breaker, Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. I don't see how to do that without messing up, but I got it.
You got this.
So, Matthias, please tell us who this beautiful young lady on the screen is with us today.
Well, today we have actually Dr. Courtney S. Baity. She is a PhD, LMFT, which is basically a licensed marriage and family therapist. And she has is the owner of Onward and Upward Psychotherapy Counseling, LLC. The Onward and Upward Psychotherapy and Counseling Service, LLC is a Tallahassee, Florida-based therapy practice serving all Florida and Georgia residents. Currently, Dr. Baity provides online therapy to individual couples and whole family systems, helping people to navigate a wide range of mental health relationship problems. Her clinical niche includes working with issues surrounding relationship troubles, communication, life transitions, anxiety, depression, sleep disturbances, sleep disturbances, dating, self-esteem, personal development, and trauma. Although she enjoys serving a broad demographics of people, her current practice demographics makeup includes mostly adults aged 20 to 25, women, Christians, and those African American / Black descendants. Dr. Baity, Readjustment Counselor at the she was a previously love-serving veterans because she was a resident adjustment counselor at the Department of Veteran Affairs. Dr. Baity is a two-time graduate from Florida State. Two times from the Florida State University in Health and Human Sciences and a BS in Psychology. Also, she graduated from the University of Kentucky, earning an MS in Family Science, emphasis in couples and family therapy. Also graduating, y'all, this is third place now. Also graduating from Texas Tech University, in which she completed an accredited financial counselor distance learning program in personal finance and finance counseling. Dr. Baity identifies herself as a lifelong void learner, servant leader, and advocate for health, including mental health, physical, relationship, spiritual, and financial health. So, yeah.
Come on. The church program when you in church, you trying to read just Easter speech,
It's it.
Come on, baby. You got it, baby.
We got this. We're going to make it work. We missing our glue that normally hold us together. But, Mr. Joseph Ward, he's out there. We got to have time off. We all need to have that self-reflect, that mental time to take off. So he's trusting me and Ian over here with his baby. This is Joe's baby, but you know what I'm saying? We're going to nurse it and we're going to make it all right. And we might have to put that Band-Aid on it to, hold us together. But we're here for his spirit. So Joe is in spirit. So Joe, just know that your podcast family miss you. But hurry on back to work. Okay, so Dr. Thanks. So now that we
tell our audience some background about yourself and what inspires you to become a psychiatrist. That's it. Psychotherapist. There we go. I'm gonna get it. Psychotherapist and other professions.
Yes. So I've always kind of had a natural curiosity of trying to understand the human psyche. So that's how we think. That's how we feel. That's also how we behave. So I started with a bachelor's degree in psychology, and of course, it's kind of just getting that generalized, broad base of understanding human psyche, human behavior. What led me down the direction of becoming a licensed marriage and family therapist is that when I was thinking about graduate school programs, I was like, what clinical setting do I want to be in? What populations do I want to work with? What type of issues do I want to help people with? And so I talked to a mentor and they said, think back on your favorite class, as an undergraduate. What was the class that you would just talk about outside of classroom? You're not doing any work. It just was natural to you. You had a natural interest. And so I actually took, I think maybe my sophomore year, I took a marriage and family class. And it was a licensed marriage and family therapist who was teaching that class. And I was like, I heard of family therapy, I heard of couples therapy, but really didn't know what was the credential to get to be able to do that. So anyways, I took that class with him. I reached out to him, kind of talked to him about kind of what his clinical experience had been and the work that he does. He was adjuncting as a professor in psychology focusing on marriage and family. But he was saying, I do run my own private practice and I do therapy with families and individuals and couples. And I also still have time to teach, so still to be able to give back in that sense, and kind of have his feet a little bit inside of academia. So that really appealed to me, as far as the kind of work that he was doing and the fact that it would give me the flexibility that if I wanted some diversity in my schedule, then I could still go back and teach at a university setting. So I kind of just modeled behind his credentials in a way. So yeah, that's what brought me where I am.
Well, that's good. That's good. Because, what I'm saying, I'm glad that we do have people, what I'm saying, that look like us that's actually doing these type of things because, what I'm saying, in the time of day it is that we have people that actually need to look like who sometimes they counsel and things like that, which goes into another thing that we have. How help us understand or help us debunk the myths surrounding therapy and explain what is therapy and why is it needed? Because a lot of people be like, I don't need no therapy.
Correct. Yeah, a lot of people have the idea of therapy is supposed to be this magic wand, that it's going to remove your problems, it's going to undo the painful events that happen in your life. Because ideally, if we had a magic wand and if we could solve our problems in that way, then things would be fixed in that manner. But when you think about going to therapy, it's not about removing you out of the situation that you're in immediately. Sometimes that's not feasible. If you're having issues on your job, if you're having issues in a relationship, if you're having issues with family members, sometimes those are issues that you cannot remove yourself from. So what therapy does is it, one, gives you a place to process, so kind of unpack, take it out of your mind, out of your heart, and just instead of it weighing you down, have an opportunity to just talk to somebody about those problems and get a clinical perspective, a clinical insight on what you're experiencing and how to navigate those problems in a way that's healthy for you and also the people that are connected to you. Therapy also provides you with coping skills that you may not have been familiar with or known about prior to therapy. So a lot of times we have a tendency to navigate towards what brings us comfort in a sense of relief, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's healthy, because a lot of times we have unhealthy vices, and they work kind of like a temporary band-aid, but in the long run, a lot of times they have negative implications behind that. They bring about more subsequent issues. So what therapy does is it says, we're going to give you some coping skills. Essentially, coping skills are exercises, behaviors, different ways of thinking that helps you to better manage the problem that you're struggling with, or help you to reduce the symptoms that you don't want to have, depending on what the presenting issue is, and do it in a way that it doesn't create more problems. Again, kind of like our typical go-to vices: stress eating, drinking alcohol, maybe consuming substances, isolating and all that kind of stuff. Is like, yeah, it might reduce the symptom or it might reduce the struggle that you're having temporarily, but what you find is that those things are just not sustainable, and they typically bring about more problems on top of the original issue you already had. So therapy in the sense of, it's not just, a lot of people say, oh, well, I don't want to just go talk to a person and tell them my business. You know, they can't change things. No, they can't change things. But when they describe things from a psychological, a biological, a social, emotional perspective, a little bit science-based, a little bit just wisdom-based through practical life experience, is that it helps one to shift the way that you're viewing the problem. And a lot of times it's the way that we're telling ourselves the story about the problem is why we have these barriers about overcoming it. So, you know, therapy is different than just talking to a friend. It's not just a matter of a person just listening. What should be happening is that you have a person that is a safe space to hear your issue, but you also should be getting psychoeducation behind that, as well as interventions, whether you practice those in your session or you get homework outside of session that ultimately brings about a better life quality over time. Yeah. Yeah.
So
that's
something
good.
that I heard you say was definitely that clinical support and the science behind it.
Yes.
So me personally, you know, I believe, you know, I do believe in therapy. I know it's a lot of people that believe, like, you know, I can go watch a YouTube video, read a couple big words, do a little book here, a little certificate here,
Yep.
and do the same thing just
Yep.
to, you know, get money. Or so I think that's one of the myths behind therapy, that people just here to get money, listen to you, and do that. So what is
Right.
some of the difference? I know you did debunk some of the myths, but what is the difference from somebody that's trained compared to somebody that just, you know, you get a little cookie cutter program and wanted to talk to you?
Correct. So the difference is that, you know, all of the approaches that a therapist uses, there's science based behind it. So there's research, there's evidence based practices, as well as there are theoretical approaches that helps you to understand the problem, the lens of the problem, and then also the way that you go about approaching that problem. I think that with a lot of YouTube or, you know, like you said, maybe even bibliotherapy, self-help books, is that it's very generalized. And so it's kind of like, well, you read this and it might be helpful, but my situation has a little bit of a nuance to it. So where do you go from there when it that those YouTube videos or those books can only take you so far? And so what therapy does is it develops a treatment plan that is science based, that is based on your unique situation, the unique nuances, so to speak, in your problem, and it will help you to get all the way to your therapeutic goal or that desired outcome. Whereas, you know, it's not to say that self-help tools are not helpful at all. I think it's a great start that you're seeking out some type of support, but in the sense that I think that it can only take you so far because it is very generalized. And a lot of times the treatment plans that are developed, they are developed uniquely. You might start with a skeleton that's general for general anxiety or very general for depression, but when you start to really get into what's the contextual factors that is perpetuating the problem, what are the contextual factors that led up to the problem, those books, those YouTube videos, they can't factor that into your treatment because they don't know you, they haven't talked to you. And so, and because of those nuances being present, and talking to a therapist and them knowing your particular story, the origin of the issue, you know, what's continuing the issue in that sense of based on what's your context in your life today, that's that difference that you get between kind of generalized self-help, motivation, support, empowerment versus working with a therapist where they develop a treatment plan specific to your life, your family, your relationship, etc.
Yeah, because I know a lot of hood therapists that know everybody's problems, and
Yes.
they can fix everything with a little bit
Yes.
of this, a little bit of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
You know, I know a lot of people like that. So
Sure. Yeah. And I
yeah,
think, yeah, and I think that a lot of people are good listeners. I think that they can be supportive. But when you start to get into more advanced therapeutic problems, you know, you find those people that kind of start to kind of spin their wheels as far as like, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what's next. I'm listening. I hear you. And that is very therapeutic to have somebody hear you. But a lot of times people want to know what's next. I don't know what to do beyond. I feel a little bit better because I vented to you, But if that person is not versed in that issue, or not versed in communication and how to fix those things from a scientifically proven standpoint, they might lead you down a direction that maybe they've seen work or they think could work, but it might actually add more fuel to the fire of your problem, again, because it's not based on anything substantial, and the thing is with therapy is that it has been proven in research in a pattern, type of way, that if you approach a problem in this way, this is the typical outcome. If this is not your outcome, this is another way to go about it. So yeah, it's, again, and I hate, I do not discredit family and friends being a sense of support, but I think the biggest takeaway message is recognize they can only take you so far.
All right. And then also, just from knowing people and working in mental health as well, a therapist can see if something is going down the wrong way. And if you need some additional help, like it could be a little impatient, because right now with depression and things like that, with this pandemic, a lot of things are going on, and some people might not really realize that they might need to have a Baker rack put on them for a quick second just to stabilize. And you talking to somebody else, a regular family or friend could miss that suicidal thought that someone who is trained on can know.
Trigger words that you hear.
Right, the trigger words, and you'd be like, okay, well, wait a minute, let's stay right there. I gotta think of something else, because you really could go out here and commit suicide, and then we're trying to prevent that.
I was just talking to them.
Right, I was just talking to. We hear it all the time. I didn't know nothing was going on. I didn't see it, but the people who are licensed therapist guys out here, they're trained to pick up on those things that we're not, because we get caught up in the nosiness of getting to know everybody's business.
That's just how they are.
And oh, that's such and such. That's just him. But this time, such and such could really act on that, because we don't know what really tipped such and such off.
Right.
So it goes into like my next question, which is, before we talk about issues that lead into couples, you talk about individuals, you talk about couples, you talk about all those different things. So what are the most prevalent issues that you see with individuals that could negatively affect how they relate with the romantic partner? Because you got to go into individual, couples, and all those different things. So what big things do you see individually that can affect people's relationships or affect them from getting in relationships?
With individuals, I see that a lot of people are struggling with kind of general mental health issues. So I would say I struggle with anxiety, I struggle with depression, I struggle with unresolved childhood trauma. I've experienced sexual assault, and so when I interact with a person, kind of all those alarm systems go off, and I don't know how to communicate that with someone in order to be in a healthy relationship, but also be making sure that I'm mindful about what's healthy is for me. So a lot of times it's those kind of generalized mental health issues that come up, that they say, okay, hey, I want to be able to better cope with this issue, or I want to actually heal it to where the symptom is not as prevalent or it's not as intense. And so it doesn't drive this wedge in between me trusting or getting to know, a new person that's actually really healthy for me. Another thing that I see as well is, it's interesting because we think, okay, everybody's adults, and so we should just automatically be well versed in what is a healthy relationship. We know what toxic is. We know what most of the time. Say, okay, that's not that doesn't look like love to me. But as far as like how to build a healthy relationship, what are those foundational building blocks that should be present? Is that a lot of times we don't really know those things until we feel them. We can't really identify them. We don't know how to do them well. And it's I like this saying is that you don't really know what needs to be healed within yourself or what needs to be developed until you're in a relationship with another person, because relationships require a level of coordination, teamwork, communication, and trust that you don't need on a day-to-day basis when you're by yourself. When you're by yourself, you're doing your own thing. What you've been doing for years and years, it works for you. But when you bring another person in the picture, it's kind of like they hold that mirror up, because they're like, this is not working very well, or there's something that could be better, and things like that. And so a lot of times people say, Okay, I just want to work on my own personal development. I want to heal from unhealthy relationships that I had with my parents that I'm still holding against all individuals of this sex or the other. You know, I want to work on communication. How do I communicate well? I want to work on trusting people. Or if a person has betrayed my trust, you know, how can I forgive? How do I forgive? How do I forgive myself? You know, so it's these skill sets that people come most of the time come to me as far as an individual to say, I want to develop these things of myself. I want to heal these parts of myself before I get into a relationship with someone else. And so I would say that a lot of times is, you know, is sometimes it's from that perspective. Sometimes people will say, I'm just struggling with my mental health in general. And I feel like this problem is rooted in a relationship. When I interact with this person, I feel super anxious. And so my mind is racing. I feel uncomfortable. I feel unsettled. I feel, you know, nervous. I feel, you know, all these things. So a lot of times people come in about general mental health issues, but a lot of times the impetus or kind of what's fueling that is an unhealthy relationship, perhaps, or maybe a relationship that is healthy. But again, if you have experienced unhealthy relationships in the past, sometimes they are marked in our brain, marked in our body as a trauma. And so anytime that you experience anything that is close to that resemblance, your body's, you know, autonomic nervous system, its, you know, protective system is going to say, red flag, we've kind of experienced this before. Should we overreact, or is this okay? So those are mostly the problems that people come to me with. I see a lot of adults, and then I also see, and I say anywhere, because I think in the introduction it said from 20 to 25. Most of my clients are anywhere from, I would say, 20 to 45, actually. And something that, again, you know, you would think that, you know, you've been living this long, and so you probably have pretty much a good experience of dating and how to build healthy relationships. And what I have found is that relationships are just an area that we're just not very well educated in. It's kind of similar to money. It's like it's a part of adulting. And so now you got a person, or now you got the money. It's like, but the management of it, you know, how do I keep it, sustain it, grow it, make it better? You know, that's just not a automatic skill set that we have. So I do a lot of psychoeducation with couples, specifically around communication and trust.
Right. That you said some good key points there that they really got me honed in. Like,
Yeah.
you know, when you go off to college and you be like, you trying to live with your best friend, but y'all really don't live together. But then when y'all move in, everything go to hell in a
Yeah.
handbasket because
Yeah.
I didn't realize you were this messy, or you doing
Yeah.
this, or you doing that, or can you
Yep.
put this back? Because people don't
You
live
know,
the
to
same
clean up
way.
behind yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
Yes.
like,
Yep.
oh God, I made that mistake by living with some people, and it was just like, no, no, no. And I always say, before I ever get in a relationship, we got to live together first
Yeah.
to make sure this can
Yeah.
work. Because you
Mm-hmm.
go to your place, I go to my place, you can hide a whole lot of stuff
Yeah.
that you don't see. And then
Hold
Absolutely.
on,
you
but
get
like
married
the
and
old folks
back.
say, that's shacking up though. We don't do that. The old folks
But
say,
but
you don't be
I
shacking
gotta
up.
know. I gotta know if we can stay
Yeah.
together, because being
Yeah.
apart and then coming over every night or something like that, that's different
Yeah.
than you there every day. That's, you know what I'm
Everything.
saying? That's
Yeah.
that people don't understand when you get married, it's an
Mm-hmm.
everyday thing. It ain't no you go to your
Yeah.
place, I go to mine, I need to debrief. Is you go
Correct.
to one end of the house, you go to the other end of the house. That's as far as
Yeah.
you going. So,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
mean, you touched on a lot of those good points. And then like the stuff with the financial piece. We're
Mm-hmm.
not taught that, especially as
Yeah.
African Americans. We're
Right.
not taught how to manage money. It's just you
Yeah.
go to work, you get money, and you spend it, and you pay your
Yep.
bill. It's
Yep.
not
Yep.
about
Mhm.
teaching us how to grow or do anything. We have to
Yeah.
learn that stuff on our own. And I think
Correct.
that's part of where the new generation needs to come in and say, hey, let's teach our kids how to
Yeah.
manage money.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
be in a healthy relationship, because all I did was see my mom get beat up. So that's what
Yeah.
I think is
Right.
normal.
Right.
So
Or I saw people arguing and fighting and fussing and
mhm,
slamming doors and leaving and all that kind of stuff. And we're socialized into that. Whether somebody sits you down and say, this is how relationships work, we are still learning something by observing it. We're learning it by how somebody interacts with us. And the way that the brain is, you know, our subconscious just tucks it away. and it uses it as a template as we go out into the world and interact with it. So yeah, it is important to be very intentional about learning the healthiest ways to go about having finances, relationships, et cetera, et cetera.
Because I know even with us doing education outreach in the community, me, Joe, and Ian, we have to go in big brother mode a lot of times. Because I done seen the girl with the black eye. She's like, well, he hit me because he loved me. No, he doesn't love you if he's hitting you.
Yeah.
And you got to approach that the right way as well, because when she leaves away, she's probably going back with him. So it's all how you approach things as well.
And I mean, we've done did things like hiding numbers in shoes for the refuge house and say, hey, when you're ready, call this number. Do this. Let me slip you this number because we can't be there. And I hate that. And we can't say don't do it because you're putting her in more odds because you get her out and she's going to run right back.
Correct. Yeah. It gets very sticky when you think about a domestic violence and unhealthy relationships because there is a conditioning, that has developed over time, and the manipulation a lot of time is so strong in those relationships is that it's created a perception that, yeah, well, I'm being abused sometimes, but it's not that all the time. Or, he told me that I did this or I did that, and that's what made him. So if I'm better, then that means that the abuse will stop. So as long as I get better, then I don't need to leave. But yes, it gets a lot of red tape gets crossed up there, and it is very difficult to, work with an individual, especially who has been kind of just drowning, kind of in this emotional abuse and manipulation, because that's what really allows the physical aspect is the emotional abuse.
So when it comes to couples actually coming to therapy, do you see it's more women leading or more men leading, or is it a group thing? Like, who actually takes the first step to say, hey, there's a problem and we need somebody to help us fix it? Or they want to fix it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Honestly, what I have seen, as far as private practice, now I will say that it might have been a little bit different in community mental health settings. Private practice, it's actually been pretty even between the sexes of who is initiating couples therapy. I would say that it's less about the sexes and about who's the most unhappiest. And so the person who is experiencing the problem with the greatest amount of dissatisfaction typically is the person who goes ahead and initiates the appointment. So that's what I've seen. I haven't really seen too much of a lead as far as the sexes, but it's more so focused on, who is the person that is just kind of like, I'm just at the brink of this thing and we need to get some help. Yeah.
Like, what happens like on most individual levels? Like, how does a person know that they're mentally ready for a relationship?
Yeah. A lot of times I ask the person a question of when you think about dating or when you think about getting back out there and being open and trusting a person, what is your initial response? Does it make you shudder? Do you like, oh no, like I can't do that. I don't trust anybody, I'm not ready to be vulnerable. Those are signs that you're not ready. So I think in that sense of asking yourself, are you ready to date again? Are you ready to, be in a relationship? It's more so about when you think about what it requires to be in a relationship, do you draw back on that or do you feel pretty open in that sense? And if you feel pretty open, then I would say that, go ahead and give it a try. The other piece that I will say is, how much self-work have you done? If you've been in a relationship before and it didn't work out, the things that were highlighted, the things that you struggled with that person, what have you done to develop those areas of yourself? Have you gone to therapy? Have you read books about this area? Have you did any intentional intervention, so that you can get stronger in this area? And how do you know that you have healed? How do you know that you're better? Is there something observable that you can name to yourself to say, oh, in that situation I would have X and now I Y? So those kind of questions will give you some insight as to if you're ready. But the thing is that a lot of times with healing is very funny, especially with relationships. I kind of talk about that relationships is like holding up that mirror of transparency that you just can't get that level of understanding or insight anywhere else, because sometimes being by yourself, there's nobody else to interact with, or for the problem, it's not an opportunity for the problem to show up by yourself. And you get in a relationship and you say, oh, well, I felt like I've been healed. I've been managing my anger. I've been doing well with communication with people at work. I've been focusing a lot on my healing and forgiveness. And then you get in a relationship, the emotional investment is much higher. Maybe even investment in other ways, financial investment, whatever that may mean for you. And then you find that your behaviors are very similar to when you were unhealed, or when you were hurting, or when you were struggling. You say, okay, I thought that I was ready. So sometimes it is an initial readiness check, just to see where you are. But sometimes it's, you don't know until you get in it. And sometimes you have to backtrack and take some steps back when you realize, what, there are parts of me that I still need to heal. I still need to address, that still have not been strengthened like I thought they were.
You make some good points, because me and my friends sit down and talk about things all the time. And the way, we in 2021, finna go in 2022, which came way too fast.
Yes, it is.
Knowing, like, I've been in a relationship for over 11 years.
Yeah.
So, like, for someone like me, if I decide to break up, just whatever reason, Lord don't never let that happen. Right. But how would you tell somebody to go back and date? Like, you've been in a relationship and the whole dating game has changed.
Yes,
like, it's not even like you go, I don't even know where you go to meet people at no more, because everything's online now. Yeah. And so how do you know what I'm saying? Do you get people like that have been in relationships, and then, like, the relationship, nothing went wrong in the relationship, they just grew apart, and it was like, it's over? Or someone passes away in a relationship and now they have to go, but that's the only person that they've been with 20, 30 years. Do you get
a support system, their partner?
Right, because how do you teach somebody how to go into the dating world that has changed from 30 years ago or 20 years ago?
Yeah. Well, the thing is that I tell that person that, recognize that there's a grief and loss process that comes in exiting out of a relationship, no matter if it was because it was toxic or it was healthy and you just grew apart, or the person passed away, or whatever the case is. So I always tell them, just because you want to say, I don't want to get stuck in this place of being alone, or whatever the case is. Don't allow isolation or loneliness to kind of be your motive for just kind of diving back into a new relationship. Because just like you go through grief and loss cycle when a person passes away, it's a very similar, because you are transitioning out of a day-to-day routine. You're transitioning out of day-to-day interactions. And so with that, it's going to be some bumps in the road, and so be patient with yourself, give yourself some grace to say, you know what, I'm just going to focus on, I'm transitioning out, not that I'm leaping from relationship to relationship. Because when you leap from relationship to relationship, you don't have time to transition into who am I now as a person, just on my own as an independent person. What you'll find is that you try to carry the culture of the relationship that you were in into the new relationship. And most of the times that's going to bring about problems, because even if the new person is similar, most of the time what was functional in the first relationship, you cannot just automatically translate that into the other one. And then for individuals who are, they're like, I'm so rusty when it comes to dating, I don't understand the new dating culture. Again, is to give yourself some time to, just take some steps back and say, what is comfortable for me? Because you don't have to participate in the broader dating culture if that's just not your thing. If online is not your thing, if serial dating or dating multiple people at one time, if that's not your thing, don't try to make it be your thing, because there are other individuals out there who are what I would consider outliers. They don't follow the general dating culture as it is. They're more so maybe old school, or they might have a similar history as you, where I've been dating or I've been married for X amount of years. I don't want to go into this new way of doing things. So just allow yourself, one, I always say, is start small. Instead of saying, I'm specifically interacting with people to date, just go out and be social. just be social, because those organic ways of meeting people a lot of time is where fruitful relationships come from. So if you don't just want to dive straight into the online dating, or you don't want to dive straight into kind of whatever mechanisms are being used, social media, that I know that they have their own kind of, you know, corners of the world when it comes to dating and that kind of stuff. If those kind of things just don't feel comfortable for you, then go back to what feels natural. You know, what are your hobbies? What interests do you have? And go to those events or interact with those type of individuals and just build natural relationships. Just be social. And then if it grows into something romantic, then go forward from there. Yeah, and that takes the pressure off too.
Okay, so that's very good, man, especially when you talk about pressure on relationships. So one of the big things when people are getting married, they go through couple counseling, far depending on your religion.
Yes.
Do you think people should do regular couple therapy before they get into like a long-term relationship or to a marriage? Should they or should they not do that? You know?
Yes. I would encourage at least 6 sessions
Okay.
Premarital counseling. It doesn't necessarily have to be we're doing this to get married. We're just doing it before we get married. Because a lot of times, you know, and what really brings about issues in a lot of couples is a lack of compatibility. And they also kind of get lost in the haze of the excitement and the highlight reels of the relationship. And just kind of the day-to-day things. So you're working, you're trying to plan the wedding, you're trying to do this, you're trying to do that. So you're not really creating space and time to really take a deep dive into conversations that need to be had, because whether you choose to have them up front or you choose to have them once the relationship is solidified, you know, through marriage or whatever the commitment, I would encourage you to have those conversations ahead of that. Because a lot of times people say, you know what, well, if I had known that, if I had known that that was your viewpoint on it, if you behaved in that kind of way, if you had this history and you were completely resistant in healing from that, then maybe I wouldn't have chose you to be my lifelong partner, a long time relationship, you know, instead of just saying maybe we're just better as friends. And so when you have those conversations, you get to be familiar with the skeletons in your own closet that can impact the skeletons of your partner, and you get to decide with all the transparent information on the table, is this still what I want to move forward in? And so, and it can make it difficult, you know, because when you know all the truths about a person and all the truths about yourself, it can place doubt sometimes to say, knowing all this is what I'm signing up for. Can we still be okay? You know, and again, that's a question that you kind of, you know, roll around and you talk about and you ask yourself, because all relationships, they kind of inherit their own unique set mixed bag of issues, things that need to be resolved. So it's really about what you are willing to deal with, so to speak, what you are willing to work through. But the thing is that a lot of times couples are so lost in the honeymoon phase, that I call it. They're so lost in you know, just kind of the day-to-day tasks of just life and sustaining life, that they don't have these deeper conversations until after marriage. So then what happens is, oh, well, I feel like you tricked me. I feel like you manipulated me into this relationship, that you lied. I didn't know who you really were. This is not what I signed up for. You know, all those kind of things. And that can really bring about a lot of strain in relationships, that not knowing, because those conversations weren't had or brought up. And then also sometimes a realized lack of compatibility, you know, sometimes comes up. So premarital counseling, having that special carved out space and time where we go through all of these key areas of a relationship. You know, when we think about things that people typically have these strains about, is about their core belief system. And our core beliefs, most of the time, they're not going to change over time. You cannot persuade a person that if they believe in, you know, not I'm trying to think of like a core belief would be, you know, I don't believe in having children before the age of 30.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if somebody is very fixed about that, they're very fixed about their goals and the reason behind that, you cannot, because you're married, you cannot go behind and say, okay, but I was okay with that before we got married and now I'm not okay with it. No, because that person was very clear with you about what their core belief was and why that core belief was in place. So a lot of times those things are kind of glossed over because you're just lost in the romance of it all or the novelty of it all. And so therapy sometimes it's kind of like, well, do I want to do premarital therapy? Because people know that if you have those conversations, you might not make it.
Right. Because see, I have a friend.
Yeah.
I got a lot of friends.
You both got a lot of friends. Okay, okay.
So I was talking with her yesterday about a relationship. So she's in a newly relationship. Well, I mean, they've been there, I think, over a year. And she was like, well, we're going to start pre-counseling. And I was like, pre-counseling? I'm like, you talking about, she's like, kind of like towards marriage counseling. I said, so have you asked the question? And she was like, no. She said, that's the point of it being pre. So I didn't know that was a thing at all. It's to say, hey, as a relationship, we're thinking about marriage. Because when you say pre-marriage counseling, in my mind, I think that the ring is already here. We already did it. We're pre, because you was like, oh, you're planning the wedding, you're doing this. But is that such a thing as somebody actually saying, let's go together as a relationship and we're here and we're thinking about getting married, da 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 da. I haven't asked the question yet. That kind of thing. So is that something that is a good thing to do?
Yes, absolutely. So they're actually working on the field of marriage and family therapy. You'll see that in a lot of the academic programs, the degree programs, is that they've changed the name to couple and family therapy because, you know, engaging in therapy related to your relationship, it is not just beneficial to once you're married, it's beneficial before then. So yes, I have seen a wide range of couples who have not been married, they're just dating, they're in a committed relationship, they have not even thought about marriage. You know, they just want to be healthier in the way that they interact with each other. They want to know each other better. They want to make sure that they're healed, you know, and on the right track before they even start thinking about marriage. So, yeah, so we would just call that couples therapy. You know, on their treatment plan, we would say, okay, this is the outcome that they're working towards, and this is the purpose for being here. So we'll just keep that in our minds, kind of as a, you know, kind of to create that blueprint of the direction that we're going in. But yes, I encourage couples therapy. It doesn't matter if you're married, engaged, whatever the case is. If you want a healthier relationship, if you want some carved out time to maybe have some of those hard conversations, those sensitive conversations, and you need a clinical perspective to help you all navigate those conversations to grow closer towards each other and make a decision and say, hey, maybe this is not the best relationship for us to be in. We have a sense of compatibility. We like being around each other. We enjoy being physical. But when it relationships, healthy relationships is more so about, can I coexist with this person? Can I create a life with this person? It's not so much, it is, you need to like the person, but that's a lot smaller part of relationship success than people think it is.
Okay.
We talked earlier about those core values. Like, you know, when people in a relationship, they have those core values they didn't talk about. I would say one of the main two would be race and religion when it comes to relationships.
Yes.
What are some things that might help couples, or how can therapy help couples kind of mold those things to their own kind of relationship for their marriage or their relationship? You know, when it comes to those big core values as far as relationship, can I give on this one? Can I not give on that one? So how can therapy help mold the divide?
Yeah, I think therapy, what it can do is just, again, kind of giving that safe space, that neutral space to have a conversation. Because a lot of times when there's conflict, is that couples get lost in an unhealthy motive, you know, and those unhealthy motives, I say, if you're having a disagreement or conflict, or, you know, you're discussing opposing sides or differing sides and you're trying to win, you're trying to persuade that person to see the world that you see the world, then the conversation is more likely going to be unproductive. So when you think about, if two people have different perspectives on religious issues, or two different perspectives on racial issues, or whatever the case is that therapy can give you an opportunity to practice engaging in healthy conflict. And essentially what healthy conflict is there's two different perspectives. You're sharing what those perspectives are, and then you ask the question of, how can we make progress knowing these two different sides? So progress can look differently. Does this mean that we decide to compromise in the middle somewhere? Do we agree to disagree? Do we decide that, you know what, thank you for sharing that perspective, but this is very important to me, and I need the person that I'm in a relationship with to be able to experience this belief, or to be able to follow this belief in the same way that I do. Again, so kind of having those conversations that are most of the time that lead to unhealthy conflict. So screaming, yelling, somebody leaves, throwing things, even, feeling like you're being talked over, so you're not being heard. I definitely also have a lot of couples that do a lot of, you're listening to respond, you're responding at the same time. It's like, of course you're not getting anywhere, because nobody's listening. Everybody is just trying to talk over each other and get their point across. So I would say that what therapy does in that sense is that it gives a safe space to have a more peaceable conversation, to have a more productive conversation. Now, when it comes to, and this is a difference between a coach, because we always get these questions of a life coach or a counselor. Mm-hmm. And the difference there is that a therapist is not going to tell you what's best for your life in that sense. We're going to talk to you about what's healthy. We're going to talk to you about what's dysfunctional. But when it comes to moral values and ideas, when it comes to politics, those kind of things that are very individual and personal, we do not say, this is how you should live. Our focus is on health. We're focused on being functional rather than dysfunctional. And so that's the difference between, I would say in therapy, is that it's giving you an opportunity to have these conversations, have a third party to mediate those difficult conversations, interject maybe some clinical, psychoeducational, relevant information to help you come to a better decision for yourself in that relationship.
Now, I got to piggyback off of that. Because my mind just went to twirling, because I'm biracial, so I'm half black and half white. Yes. So I have a lot of friends who are biracial and multicultural and all the other stuff. But I was blessed that my parents' families didn't have issues with the whole, my mom being white, my dad being black. Now, you have a lot of people who do have that. The two individuals who are getting married or in a relationship are okay with everything. But the families are causing a lot more problems and strain on their relationship. And it goes back to religion, because I have a friend who, she can't really date who she wants to date because that's unacceptable in their culture. And it's like, what do they do because I'm caught? So how can you help those type of people? Because it's a little deeper than just self. It's like, I'm going to get this ramification of my parents going to cut me off. I'm going to be in this world by myself because I choose to be with who I love, who I want to be with. Because it's taught not to see color, race, or anything, but in their background, it's like, you better not date this, you better not do this, you better stay within your race, or you better stay within your religious background. So how do you teach people like that who really want to be together, they have everything, but the families are keeping them apart? How does that, can they do therapy for that?
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, that's more so helping that person process feeling torn between their loyalty and their allegiance to the relationship, and then also to the family. But I tell clients all the time that, that's a very sticky space to be in, because you love both parts of yourself, or both of those relationships and those connections. And sometimes it's not an ideal solution. It's not an ideal answer. Sometimes you're stuck with choosing between a rock and a hard place. And so sometimes I think about when you're struggling between what your family wants for you versus what you want for yourself, you have to ask yourself the question of what decision is going to help you to have peace when you go to sleep at night, or have the most peace when you go to sleep at night. Because again, you want to have both. That's what's ideal. But sometimes having both is not an option, especially if family is very fixed in their ways, you know, and you're very committed to the relationship that you're in. You know that it's good for you, it's healthy, and you don't want to change just to appease what your family's beliefs or what their desires are for you. So more so therapy will do is kind of just helping you to think through that about, you know, how, and also empowering you to make the decision that's best for you. Because a lot of times, you know, there is this sense of pressure that, you know, well, I owe it so much to my family. They've done so much to help me get to where I am. They've helped me so much, you know, to raise me and all those kind of things. So a lot of times people feel bad for choosing what's in their best interest over what their families are wanting, you know. So it's a lot of processing and empowering. Again, that's one of those things where, you know, there's no right or wrong as far as what you choose. You know, it's about what can you go to sleep at night with, you know, what can you have a sense of peace or the most sense of peace about, and what can you make sense of, you know, if you do choose your relationship and family is upset with you and they choose not to show up, you know, how do you navigate that? You know, how do you heal from that? You know, perhaps do you need to bring that family member that is just really, really against what you're wanting into the family therapy session to have a conversation so they can be aware of, hey, you know, I know that you have a vision for this person's life, but recognize your vision is clashing with their own, and look how that's impacting them emotionally. Their psychology is impacting their mental health, you know, and also the family relationship as a whole. So sometimes there is a need to invite that individual into session, but I always tell my clients to keep an open mind, that if it's a core belief, you know, it is very difficult to try to persuade them or even get them to lean on that just a little bit. So yes, those conversations can be very insightful. They can be a part of the process to move forward, but keep your expectations open. You know, I don't want you to come in and say, because we're having this family session, they're eventually going to see things my way, because that doesn't always happen. And again, if it's a core belief, a lot of times it won't happen. So then it goes to, what do I do now that I know that they're fixed on what they believe, I'm fixed on what I believe? How can we make some progress? How can we move forward from here so that we don't stay in this stuck place?
That's good. That's good.
That's good.
Yeah, 'cause we talked about a lot of trauma and
Mm-hmm.
couples going through it and individuals going through it. Can you speak to some of the good that comes out, you know, out of all the situations and different stuff, like the good benefits of therapy or just talking to somebody, and like the joy that can come from it just by doing it?
Yeah, you know, just kind of thinking about the clients that I have worked with in the experience, you know, they always say kind of these mouthful type of, you know, she changed my life. You know, this was something that I didn't know that I needed, but after I did it, you know, I realized that I am better, that I'm free, you know, from whatever I was experiencing before. And I think those are just kind of testimonial things. It doesn't really get into kind of how do you, in a quantifiable way, you know, kind of list what therapy does. But what therapy should do is, a presenting problem that you come in with, it decreases or it reduces the frequency of that problem and the intensity of that problem. So whether that's the relationship problem, whether that is an individual mental health issue, is that it should not be as present. It's very similar to psychiatric medication. You know, you don't get and when we think about recovery, it doesn't mean that it is not present at all, but it should not be riddling you to the point that your quality of life is being diminished. So once you have gone through therapy, is that your thoughts should be healthier, your feelings should be healthier, your behavior should be healthier, your relationship should be healthier. You should feel just this overall improvement of your quality of life specific to that issue, and then just life in general. So, you know, say for instance, if an individual came in, they said, you know, I'm constantly fighting and arguing with my spouse. You know, they always do this thing and it really gets on my nerves. And it just always ends into this big blow up. You know, a success story in that would possibly be, well, my spouse still does the same thing, but it doesn't impact me the same. You know, because a lot of times therapy is not changing the situation, but healing on the inside, so that the way that you respond or the way that it touches you is very different.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good. So is there anything out there that you can give our people in podcast land, YouTube land, you know, saying in the community itself? Can you give them any tips that will be great for them to build a healthy relationship?
Yeah. So I would say the biggest part of building a healthy relationship is it needs to be a stable foundation of friendship, because friendship is important. So, you know, when you think about having a friend, you know, how do you treat that person? You're respectful towards that person, you are considerate of that person. So everything that you do, you know, if you're going to be in a relationship, recognize you cannot take individualistic perspective. A lot of times people just want to, you know, say individual plus individual and think that it's going to work. You're literally, you operate very differently in a relationship, because you're not just operating for me and self anymore. Is that in all your ways, in everything that you do, you ask the question of, how is this going to impact the person that's connected to me? You know, and so in doing that and making sure that you're being open in your communication, being slow to anger, you know, even if a person is saying something that bothers you or they're doing something that doesn't make sense, take some steps back before you even respond. And then ask yourself, okay, what is a way that I can respond in a respectful manner to this person and is going to help us to progress moving forward? The other piece that I would say, as far as, you know, great tips to consider in relationships, is please know that you're in a relationship with a human being, and that person is going to be imperfect, just like you're imperfect. And I think that people kind of go in a lot of times based off of the highlight reels of that person. They do all the right things, they say all the right things, and so as soon as that person misses that one time and say, oh no, this relationship, I don't want to do this anymore, you know, you're not who you said you were. It is, they are who they said they were. They might have had an off day, you know, they might have a lot of stressors that are going on at that time. So grace, you know, being able to say, I'm going to be patient with this person, I'm going to be kind to this person. And also forgiveness is big as well. You know, is getting to a place of saying, even in that person's imperfections, even in that person's mess ups, that I'm going to be able to forgive them. And a lot of times people struggle with forgiveness because they hear that and they're like, oh no, I'm not doing that because they were wrong. Yes.
Pride to get you.
Yes, and they were wrong, but forgiveness is not about excusing the behavior. It's about acknowledging the behavior. It's about talking about what are the acts of atonement that are required. How can this person redeem themselves? And then also making a decision to say, once we've talked about this, I'm not going to keep throwing this back up in your face every time that you make a mistake or you hurt me or we get into an argument, you know, and focusing more so about moving ahead so that we don't recreate this problem rather than continue to return back to the past, to that one time or that other time that you hurt me or you made a mistake. You know, so those are the things that I would say, is that, you know, communication is big, grace and forgiveness is big. And also just recognize you're in a relationship with a human being. You know, it's not going to be perfect, but as long as your commitment level is strong and you're willing to navigate when there's those rough patches or those times where, you know, maybe you're struggling individually or the relationship is struggling, you know, then you'll get through it. And then again, eliciting additional professional support. If you feel like friends, family, maybe even pastor might have a biased perspective of your problem, eliciting some support from a licensed marriage and family therapist or somebody who is clinically, you know, versed in order to support you all through those issues, that will be my advice.
Okay, well, that's great. Now, my other question is, this is probably my last question.
Yes.
Can you please tell these great people out here how we can get in contact with you? If I got some issues going on, or my relationship is on the rocks, or I just don't know what else to do, I need to talk to somebody. How can they get a hold of Dr.
Where can we send these donations for this good therapy we just got? Because, you know, what
you might want to have some
I just charge, you know.
or who they got to come talk to church, say, you know what, I liked her on that podcast. I need to get her down here to speak to these women and these young girls and these men about anything from, because we learned a lot today. We could talk about family therapy, individual therapy, counseling, financial big piece now, people. So how can people get in contact with Dr. Courtney Baity?
Yes. So a couple of ways to get in contact with me. If you're interested in scheduling an appointment, if you go to psychologytoday.com, which is a national, it might be international, but it is a directory for therapists. And so if you type my name in, it'll pull up my profile page. On that page, it has all the information about my background, my training, my specialties, as well as there's some buttons on there. You can click on there and it'll say, give me a call or send me a message. So those are ways to get in contact with me directly. Another way to get in contact with me is through my email, that my direct professional email. And that is BAITYMFT@gmail.com. As well as the business Onward and Upward Psychotherapy and Consulting Services phone line. So that's 850-296-8799. So any of those mediums, it is how you can get in contact with me. I'm more than happy to just answer some consulting questions. If it's, about how do I get started with therapy? What will that look like? What is the process of scheduling? And then, of course, if you just have any other questions about mental health, or you would like to book me for speaking, or whatever the case is, those are the ways to get in contact with me, and I'll be more than happy to talk with you.
We definitely thank you. We definitely
the information she just gave is, if you watch this on YouTube, right next to that subscribe button and that alert button, it's all right now. So, as you pass that subscribe button, go ahead and tap it, and you'll just see it appear as well.
And go ahead and put that appointment.
Good Joe, it's that algorithm right now. And
look at that right there. She got
light. She holding up that big picture right there. Overlook. There it is. That picture right there. Yeah, you're gonna see that flyer. We're gonna make sure we pass that on to everybody. And just remember that Mind Your Body and Soul is the greatest podcast there is for number one. And we're here to help our listeners learn more about various health topic information that will help them get access and to inform them and empower and uplift. We got uplifted today. And our listeners become the most healthier version that they can be. Also, Neighborhood Medical Center's Mind Your Body and Soul podcast is available at nmcpodcast.com. Check it out. You'll see all these good episodes we have. And also it's available on Anchor, Breaker, Radio Republic, Pocket Cast, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube, and anywhere else you listen to the great information. We out there. Tia Sweet, in the last word, so we let this beautiful lady go.
Nope, that's it for me. We thank y'all for joining in and everything. Make sure you check us out on our parent website at neighborhoodmedicalcenter.org. You can find out all the information that we're doing here at Neighborhood Medical Center. Book appointments. You can get in contact with Miss Courtney Baity up here, Dr. Courtney Baity. So, find out. If you can't find her, call us. We'll get you the information. Yes. So, thank y'all for listeing.
And don't forget to send your donation/consultant fee for this good information we just got now. We got to support. Miss Courtney, thank you for coming and stopping by and talking to us. And also Joseph Ward. We did it. We made it.
We made it.
We made it. All right. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank y'all.